New Mexico calls itself the land of enchantment, but hidden across its deserts and mountains are more than 400 dead towns. One was an outlaw hideout linked to Butch Cassidy. One was so sinful that people called it Sodom. One was drowned by a river in a single night. And our number one hides a cemetery filled with hundreds of white iron crosses, each one marking a man who went underground and never came home. Today, we are counting down 11 ghost towns of New Mexico. Let's begin. Number 11. Golden, New Mexico. A dusty scenic road winds between Albuquerque and Santa Fe, known today as the Turquoise Trail. Beneath the Ortiz Mountains along this route sit the weathered remains of Golden, a town whose name says it all. Most people believe America's gold story began in California in 1849. Golden proves them wrong. In 1825, placer gold was discovered on Tuerto Creek, on the southwest side of the Ortiz Mountains. That discovery sparked the first gold rush west of the Mississippi River, years before the famous rushes of California and Colorado ever happened. In the late 1820s, two small mining camps grew out of those first discoveries, El Real de San Francisco and Placer del Tuerto. Around 1830, the San Francisco Catholic Church was built, becoming the heart of the growing community. For decades, the area stayed relatively quiet, until larger companies began putting real money into the mines, bringing in workers and drawing individual prospectors along with them. In 1879, a new town called Golden was formed just south of Tuerto, and it soon absorbed both of the older camps. By 1880, Golden was booming, with saloons, businesses, a post office, and a school serving the mining district. But like every gold town, Golden lived on borrowed time. The deposits dwindled, the companies pulled out, and the miners drifted away. The few who remained turned to farming to survive, while some stubborn souls kept digging for the last traces of gold. There was only so much left to find. By 1928, so few people remained that the post office closed its doors, and Golden officially became a ghost town. Today, the restored San Francisco Catholic Church still stands watch over the town site, and it has become one of the most photographed churches on the entire Turquoise Trail. Around it lie old adobe walls, mining remnants, and an overgrown cemetery, quiet monuments to the men who chased gold here before almost anyone else in the West. Number 10. Shakespeare, New Mexico. In the far southwest corner of New Mexico, near Lordsburg, a name straight out of English literature marks one of the most authentic Old West settlements in America. Welcome to Shakespeare. Shakespeare is not a polished tourist attraction with gift shops and ticket booths. It is the real thing, a genuine frontier settlement where the buildings still look much as they did a century and a half ago. Walking its dusty street feels like stepping directly into the 1800s, with no ticket booths, no crowds, and nothing standing between you and the frontier past. In its rough and rowdy days, Shakespeare attracted the kind of characters that made the Wild West famous. Among them was an outlaw known as Russian Bill, a colorful figure who claimed noble Russian blood and rode with the rustlers and desperados of the region. According to local legend, Russian Bill's outlaw career came to a sudden and permanent end right here in town, at the hands of citizens who had run out of patience with lawlessness. Life in Shakespeare was never easy. The town rose and fell with the fortunes of the surrounding mines, and when the booms faded, so did the population. One by one, the businesses closed, and the desert began reclaiming the streets. But Shakespeare's story has a remarkable twist. Instead of crumbling into dust like so many towns on this list, it was saved. A single family took on the mission of protecting the town site, and for generations, they have dedicated themselves to keeping its history alive. Today, they open the town for guided tours on select weekends, walking visitors through the old buildings and bringing the stories of the frontier back to life. Number 9. Glenrio and Cuervo, New Mexico. Not every ghost town dies from fire, flood, or a mining bust. Glenrio and Cuervo, our double feature at number 9, were murdered by a road. For decades, these communities lived and breathed on Route 66, the most famous highway in American history. Millions of travelers rolled through on the Mother Road, stopping for gas, food, and a night's rest. Towns along the route did not need mines or mills. The highway itself was their gold mine. Glenrio sits in one of the strangest locations of any ghost town in America, straddling the border between New Mexico and Texas. It was established in 1903, when the railroad came through, and it later thrived on the endless stream of Route 66 traffic passing its doors. Cuervo, to the west, began as a small railroad and ranching community. When Route 66 arrived, the town expanded with it. Gas stations, homes, and businesses grew along the roadside, all supported by the travelers flowing across the country. And then Interstate 40 arrived. When the new interstate replaced Route 66, the traffic that had fed these towns for generations disappeared in what felt like a single season. Cars that once rolled down Main Street now flew past at highway speed, with no reason to stop and often no exit to use. Businesses closed, houses emptied. The lifeblood of both towns simply drained away. Today, Glenrio holds only a few remaining buildings, quiet and weathered on the state line. Cuervo offers a haunting scene just off the interstate. Crumbling adobe homes, a weathered stone church, and a handful of structures slowly surrendering to time. Thousands of drivers pass within sight of it every single day, and almost none of them know its story. Number 8. White Oaks, New Mexico. 3 miles north of Carrizozo, a lonely road ends at White Oaks, a town once called the liveliest place in all of New Mexico. Before the boom, this was frontier cattle country. A rough cowboy community far from the adobe villages most people picture when they think of old New Mexico. There were no grand missions here, no Spanish plazas, just ranchers, open range, and hard living. Then gold changed everything. Prospectors discovered a rich vein running down into Baxter Mountain, and it was described as almost pure. Word spread fast, and gold hunters poured in from every direction. In a matter of months, the sleepy cattle outpost transformed into a roaring boomtown. During the boom, White Oaks grew to be second in size only to Santa Fe. A remote mining camp in Lincoln County had suddenly become one of the largest communities in the entire territory, filled with new money and new ambition. For a brief shining moment, it truly seemed like nothing could stop this town. And this was Billy the Kid country. White Oaks sat in the heart of Lincoln County, the region made famous by the Lincoln County War and the legend of the young outlaw himself. The town's streets saw miners, merchants, gamblers, and gunmen, all chasing their own version of fortune in a lawless land. The town built solid, impressive structures for its size. One brick building downtown served as a law office during the boom years and later became a newspaper office. It eventually housed a saloon, and it still stands today as one of the town's most recognizable landmarks. But the gold in Baxter Mountain was not endless. As the mines declined, the people of White Oaks made a practical choice. They moved to nearby Carrizozo, leaving their once mighty settlement behind. The liveliest town in New Mexico fell silent, its Victorian buildings left to face the desert wind alone. Number 7. Chloride, New Mexico. West of the curiously named town of Truth or Consequences, hidden in the mountains, lies a silver town frozen so perfectly in time that stepping into its old store feels like time travel. That town is Chloride. The story began in 1881, when an Englishman named Harry Pye laid claim to the land after silver was found nearby. The discovery set off one of the largest mining rushes in New Mexico's history. Miners swarmed into the canyon, and a full town exploded into existence, with businesses lining a main street of false front buildings and traditional adobe structures. In its best years, Chloride was home to thousands of residents, with numerous saloons serving the thirsty miners and a red light district keeping the nights lively. Life here was dangerous, in more ways than one. The town endured repeated attacks from Apache warriors defending their homeland, and those conflicts continued until about 1887. Then the money itself betrayed the town. The silver panic of 1893 sent prices crashing, and when the United States moved to the gold standard in 1896, silver's fate was sealed. At the same time, the ore in the surrounding mines was running thin. Miner after miner packed up and moved on, and Chloride was essentially abandoned. But here is what makes Chloride extraordinary today. Unlike towns that crumbled into dust, many of its original structures are still standing. The main street remains lined with its false fronts and adobe walls. And the crown jewel is the Pioneer Store Museum. Inside, merchandise from the 1880s still sits on the shelves, exactly where it was when the doors closed generations ago. Tools, goods, and supplies, all waiting for customers who will never return. The town also holds darker relics, including a hanging tree said to be 200 years old, standing as a grim reminder of frontier justice. And remarkably, Chloride is not completely dead. A handful of year-round residents remain, serving as unofficial caretakers of its history, running a museum, a gift shop, and a restaurant in original buildings. Number 6. Mogollon, New Mexico. A winding mountain road, deep inside the Gila National Forest of southwestern New Mexico, leads to Mogollon, one of the wildest mining towns the West ever produced. Mogollon was built on incredible mineral wealth. The mines here produced millions of dollars in gold, silver, and copper, drawn from the mountains by men willing to work in one of the most remote corners of the territory. The population climbed to around 2,000 people, all packed into a narrow canyon far from civilization, surrounded by nothing but forest, rock, and sky. And with the money came the madness. Mogollon sported many businesses, along with 2 famous red light districts. Gamblers and gunmen kept the town on its toes, and the remote location made it a natural haven for men who preferred to stay beyond the reach of the law. The most famous of them all was Butch Cassidy. The legendary outlaw is said to have made Mogollon his headquarters, using the isolated mountain town as a base between his infamous exploits. Imagine the scene: one of the most wanted men in America, walking the same muddy street as miners coming off their shifts, everyone minding their own business in a town where questions were unwise. Isolation protected the outlaws, but it could not protect the economy. Mogollon's fate was tied to its mines, and as they emptied of their riches, the people emptied out with them. The saloons emptied, the red light districts closed their doors for the last time, and the canyon slowly fell silent. Yet Mogollon never completely vanished. Because of its remote location inside the national forest, many of its structures survived, abandoned but well preserved. Today, visitors who brave the mountain road find a remarkable collection of historic buildings lining the old street, along with a few small businesses that still operate for travelers. Standing in Mogollon today, surrounded by forested peaks and weathered storefronts, it is easy to picture the gamblers, the miners, and maybe even Butch Cassidy himself moving through the shadows. Number 5. Loma, Parda, New Mexico. Respectable New Mexicans of the 1800s spoke of one particular town only with disgust. They called it Sodom on the Mora, and it was the most scandalous place on this entire countdown. Its real name was Loma, Parda. Loma, Parda began innocently enough as a quiet farming village of about 500 people on the banks of the Mora River. Its families worked the land, and nothing suggested the wild future that was coming. Then, in 1851, the United States Army built Fort Union nearby, one of the most important military posts in the entire Southwest. And where there are soldiers, there is money. Where there is money, there is temptation. Almost overnight, the small farming settlement swelled into one of the largest towns in New Mexico. Following the soldiers to their new post, women of ill repute quickly took up residence, and the rest, as they say, is history. Brothels, saloons, and dance halls filled the town. Soldiers marched from the fort to Loma, Parda with their pay in their pockets and marched back with empty ones. And it was not just soldiers. Sitting near the Santa Fe Trail, the town attracted cowboys and desperados from across the frontier. Crime and thievery ran rampant through the community. Loma, Parda became a place where a man could find whiskey, women, cards, and trouble, all on the same street, often in the same building. For decades, the party never stopped. But Loma, Parda's entire economy depended on one thing: the fort. In 1889, Fort Union closed its gates for good. The soldiers left, the money dried up, and the town's reason for existing disappeared. The decline was swift and merciless. By 1900, Loma, Parda was wiped off the map. Today, reaching the ruins requires crossing a footbridge over the Mora River. On the other side, crumbling walls and vacant spaces mark the spots where the brothels, saloons, and dance halls once roared. The silence there now is complete. Number 4. San Marcial, New Mexico. Some people call our next entry the Pompeii of New Mexico because it was not abandoned slowly over decades. It was destroyed, buried, and erased. Its name was San Marcial. San Marcial grew on the banks of the Rio Grande, about 25 miles south of Socorro. Its great boom began in 1880, when the Atchison, Topeka, and Santa Fe Railroad selected the area as a major railroad hub. The railroad built machine shops, a foundry, and a roundhouse with a turntable, and hired hundreds of men to run them. The town flourished. It had a famous Harvey House restaurant, large shops, and even a skating rink. Between 1890 and 1920, San Marcial ranked as the second largest town in Socorro County, with a population reaching into the thousands. Residents were convinced their town would grow into one of New Mexico's finest. But San Marcial had a fatal flaw. It sat on the floodplain of the Rio Grande, and the river had already destroyed an earlier version of the town in 1866. The people rebuilt, defended, and hoped. Then came 1929. On August 13th, after days of heavy rain, the swollen Rio Grande burst through and flooded the town. People escaped in their nightclothes as water poured through the streets. The survivors began to rebuild almost immediately. Then, just weeks later, on September 23, a second and even larger flood struck. Residents climbed onto the roof of the Harvey House and watched a grand piano drift past in the current. That second flood finished San Marcial. The water left behind silt so deep that it buried the town, with the second story of the train station sitting at the new ground level. Buildings that stood in water for weeks collapsed under their own weight. The railroad refused to rebuild and moved its operations and employees away. Without the railroad, there was nothing left to stay for. Mercifully, the people had warning, and no lives were lost. But the town itself died completely. Today, little remains beyond a lonely cemetery and a few ruined walls. Number 3. Elizabethtown, New Mexico. High in the mountains of northern New Mexico, near present-day Angel Fire, locals still remember a place they simply called E-Town. Elizabethtown holds a special place in history as New Mexico's first incorporated town. Elizabethtown was born in 1866, when gold was discovered in the surrounding mountains along with promising copper deposits, including the Mystic Copper Mine. Word of the strikes spread like wildfire, and fortune seekers stampeded into the high country. The growth was explosive. In its glory years, nearly 7,000 people called this remote mountain settlement home, an astonishing number for that time and place. Stop and picture that, 7,000 people in a remote mountain valley in the 1800s. E-Town was not some scattering of tents. It was a real city, with 2 newspapers reporting the news, multiple hotels hosting travelers and businessmen, and a notorious dance hall called the Senate, where miners spent their gold as fast as they dug it up. For a time, Elizabethtown looked unstoppable. It had size, wealth, infrastructure, and ambition. It was proof that civilization could take root, even in the most remote corners of the territory. But mountain gold is a cruel foundation for a city. As the richest deposits thinned, the boom energy faded, and the population began drifting toward newer opportunities. The town held on, smaller but alive, into the new century. The final blow landed in 1903, when a devastating fire tore through Elizabethtown. For a community already weakened by mining decline, the destruction marked the beginning of the end. After the fire, residents rebuilt less and left more with every passing season. Year after year, the town shrank, until the post office, the last official heartbeat of any small town, finally closed its doors in 1931. Today, the site tells a humbling story. Of the city of 7,000, only foundations and scattered artifacts remain among the pines. The Senate Dance Hall, the hotels, the newspaper offices, all of it has melted back into the mountain landscape. Elizabethtown earns the number 3 spot for the sheer scale of what was lost, an entire city that simply dissolved. But our final 2 towns have even more powerful stories. One died slowly for 100 years, the other died screaming. Number 2. Lake Valley, New Mexico. Every prospector dreams of one impossible strike. In the hills of southern New Mexico, that dream actually came true, and it created a town called Lake Valley. Silver was discovered here in the 1870s, and the town quickly filled with miners chasing the veins through the hills. Then someone broke into a chamber in the rock that defied belief. They called it the Bridal Chamber, and it was a cave of almost pure silver. Miners did not have to blast and crush tons of rock to extract specks of metal. In the Bridal Chamber, the silver was so rich and so concentrated that it could practically be carved from the walls. The chamber yielded millions, and Lake Valley became one of the most famous mining sites in the territory. The town grew into an important railhead, shipping its treasure out to the world, with saloons, homes, and businesses lining its dusty streets. But even a miracle has limits. The impossibly rich ore was finite. And worse, the price of silver itself was doomed. When silver prices crashed in the 1890s, Lake Valley's fate was sealed. The silver panic of 1893 devastated mining towns across the West, and a town built entirely on silver had nowhere to hide. What makes Lake Valley special, though, is how it died. There was no fire, no flood, no sudden evacuation. Instead, the town simply faded, decade after decade, in one of the longest slow deaths of any ghost town in America. Families left one at a time, sometimes years apart. Buildings emptied gradually, room by room. A shrinking handful of residents held on through the 1920s, the Great Depression, the Second World War, and beyond. And then, in 1994, the very last resident of Lake Valley turned out the lights and moved away. After more than a century of life, the town officially died within living memory. Today, the Bureau of Land Management protects the site, and visitors can take self-guided walking tours during daylight hours, stepping carefully past weathered buildings that watched a town die in slow motion. Number 1. Dawson, New Mexico. Every other town on this countdown died from economics, fire, or flood. Our number 1 is different. Dawson was marked by human tragedy on a scale that is still hard to comprehend. Dawson's story began in 1901, when a rancher named John Barclay Dawson sold his land to the Dawson Fuel Company, and a railroad was constructed connecting the new coal town to Tucumcari. In 1906, the powerful Phelps Dodge Company bought the mine and poured money into development. What rose from the desert was extraordinary. Dawson became one of the largest coal towns in the entire Southwest, with thousands of residents during its busiest years. And this was no rough mining camp. Dawson had a hospital, theaters, schools, and amenities that rivaled established cities. Immigrant miners came from across the world, from Italy, Greece, Mexico, and beyond, all seeking a better life in the coal seams of New Mexico. October 1913 changed everything. Deep in one of the mines, an explosion ripped through the tunnels after dynamite ignited coal dust. 263 miners were killed. It remains one of the deadliest mining disasters in American history. Families waited at the mine entrance for men who never came out. Dawson grieved, buried its dead, and kept mining, because coal towns had no other choice. Then, unbelievably, it happened again. In 1923, another explosion tore through the mines, killing 123 more men. Some of them were the sons of miners who had died in 1913. Two disasters 10 years apart, claiming 386 lives between them. The town survived its tragedies, but it could not survive the decline of coal. In the 1950s, Dawson was officially abandoned, its buildings removed, its people scattered. Today, one thing remains, and it is unforgettable. The Dawson Cemetery, filled with rows of white-painted iron crosses, one for each miner lost. They stand together in the New Mexico sun, in perfect silent formation. That's it for today, guys. If you enjoyed this journey through the land of enchantment's forgotten places, like this video, and subscribe for more abandoned towns and lost history. And tell us in the comments, which of these towns would you dare to explore?